Hi everyone, I'm Dan Schrack,
I'm Erin Lanahan,
and this
and this
is
is
Journey
Journey
Journals.
Journals.
Erin and I are friends that met working together at a TV station, and we love to travel.
We also talked about doing a podcast before I moved away, and the two things came together.
We chatted with some of the who's who in the YouTube travel community about their passion for adventure. I wanted to find out what makes them go, what the life, job, and business was like.
For me, travel is about the experience. I love being able to try new things, talk to new people, and most importantly, eat new food.
London is an action packed city, something a lot of people love. Our guest followed her heart to England, and she built a business sharing that experience. From Love and London, Jess Dante. Well, listen, thank you again for taking time out of your day to chat with us. I personally, I want to thank you for the content that you post specific to moving abroad, moving to London, all of the prep work that goes into it. I mean, everything from the apartment hunting to the finances. It gives me hope that someday I can make that leap and move overseas because it's a goal of mine at some point in the future.
Cool. Yeah, no worries. I mean, it's lots of people have watched all that stuff and I mean, sadly I can't help with the hardest part, which is the visa, but if I can help with other things then
I want to talk to you about that. What is that process like for you?
So, by the way, are we like recording now?
Yes, we
Yeah,
we are
okay. All right.
recording.
Okay. So, basically the way that it worked for me, how I moved over is a route that I wouldn't recommend anyone to follow if I'm honest. But I was originally married to somebody who is English. So, we got married because we kind of had to not kind of we did have to for me to be able to move over here. I had some problems with immigration in the UK trying to come over originally before we got married and when we were still dating. And at that point, unfortunately, the only way for us to get around it was to get married. So we got married in New York. So I ended up being on two different spouse visas over 5 years. And then after 5 years, when you've been on a spouse visa, you can apply for what's called indefinite leave to remain. And then that is basically permanent residency. And then my ex, obviously we're not together anymore, but because I was not on dependent on the spouse visa anymore, I was able to stay. So, which was good because obviously there was a lot going on with getting divorced and everything. But yeah, that was the route that I took. But it's not for everyone.
No, I mean it seems like though, honestly, almost a daunting task to pack up your life and move, 3,000 miles away from home. Because New York, is it New York City that's home?
Long Island, so not too far from the city.
Very good. Erin,
I
where are
live
you?
in Jersey City now, but
Ah,
my mom's side is from Long Island. So when you started talking, I was like, "Yep, she's a Long Island girl." I
She could
could
hear
hear
it.
it in her
if I
voice.
keep talking about it
Yeah,
more, it'll come out a bit more. So
yeah. I get it. Especially whenever I go home to Jersey, every now and then I'll slip into like a little bit of a Jersey accent, but then my mom will catch it. She'll be like, "What did you just say?" And I'm like, "I'm so sorry."
yeah,
I'll
exactly.
enunciate better.
Please do. Use your words, all the words. So you've been in London now for 10 years, right?
Yeah, 10 years. I just had my 10-year anniversary party last weekend.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You've got to really love it then to have wanted to stay.
Yeah, I think, obviously like going through a divorce, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, what step I wanted to take. But, I moved here when I was 23 and my whole life has been here. Like the majority of my adult life has been in this city and I had this group of friends that, my strongest group of friends were the ones that were in London with me. And I obviously had my business at that point too. So that's extremely tied to London. And yeah, so I just figured I don't really want to go start over again. I really love it here anyway. So maybe if I didn't love it, I would have done something different, but I really didn't want to leave at all. So I decided to stay. And yeah, I mean, I've just grown to love it more and more. And I'm such a city person as it is. If I hadn't met my ex and moved here, I would be in New York City, probably, maybe LA. But I always need to have the buzz, and London just always has the buzz. And it has also the opportunity for a lot of people, depending on what you're trying to do. So I love that.
Do you think you would still be kind of producing similar content? Do you think you'd still be on this path had you stayed in New York City or chosen to, move to LA?
I don't know actually, because, well, obviously starting your own business and working freelance in the US is harder to do because you have to pay for health insurance. Like, I've never had to encounter that. I've never worked freelance in the US before, and I've always been here, and no matter, how much money I made every month, if anything happened, I could always go to the hospital and I don't have to worry about paying for it. So that's something that is really good. I probably would have started on like the regular corporate career path, and then eventually I definitely would have done something on my own. I don't know if it would have been in this path. Who knows? But I've always loved tourism. I've always wanted to work in tourism. And I've always wanted to be my own boss. So I knew eventually that would be the path that I would take.
So how did I mean, it seems like almost like a given, but how did Love in London start for you?
Yeah, so it actually started just as a blog when I first moved over here, where I was just kind of documenting for family and friends my whole transition and my new life and the things I was doing. And then I realized, I really wanted to build up my own business, and I was trying to figure out what avenues to do that. And I didn't have any money, and I didn't want to try to like raise money or anything. So I just kind of figured, well, why don't I try creating content in some form and seeing if that's, because this was when the influencer industry was starting to get more traction, and people were actually making quite good money at that point already doing content creation. So I was like, cool, let me see if I can make this work. And I tried a bunch of different paths. And eventually I was like, oh, I'm actually not really reading blogs very much. I'm a bit on Instagram, but I love watching YouTube content. And I was hopping onto the YouTube app every day. And that this was in the era of that there was a lot of people who were doing daily or almost daily vlogs. And I was like invested. I would hop on every day to see what they posted. And I really loved it. And I think this was around when Casey Neistat started to do his stuff. And he really just like changed the YouTube game. And so I realized that to stand out, especially if I wanted to do something in travel, there was a lot of people blogging, doing travel blogging, a lot of people doing Instagram for travel, but there wasn't really anyone doing that. There weren't as many people doing YouTube because it's a higher barrier to entry. And there was no one doing anything specifically about London. And I knew that I really wanted to do something that was more niche. So I just started making videos. Some of them were about specifically London, some of them were not. And the ones that were about London performed much better than like the general travel videos I had done before that. So I was like, sweet, that's my niche. That's what I'm going to do. I don't have to go travel to do that. It's actually a wise business decision. And yeah, so I just learned how to create YouTube videos. I basically built this up as a side hustle for like two to 2.5 years while I was in corporate life. And then I went freelance in social media. So I was kind of like bouncing back and forth between contracts and working on this. And then eventually it became something that was big enough that I was making enough money that I didn't have to take any more freelance work on. And then, yeah, it just kind of really took off from there once I was able to dedicate full time to it. Started hiring people, bits and pieces to do little things. And yeah, so that was about almost 8 years ago now that I started.
Gosh. That must be so
When-
nice too, that you're just like creating content in your backyard, that like you don't really have to like travel to these crazy places, because like London is, I'm sure there's always something new going on every week.
Yeah, exactly. And there's, we have millions and millions of people that come to visit London every year. So it will be hard for us to infiltrate the entire market. I mean, obviously the idea is we'll reach as many people as possible, but we'll always have more people we can be talking to, more content we can be creating about new things, and people who haven't found us through various avenues yet. So it's not like if I was in Edinburgh, and of course they get lots of tourists there, but nowhere near the level that we do here. So that can kind of like level out, but we'll always keep growing.
To kind of piggyback off of what Erin just said, and then you mentioning the new content, I wonder, Erin's got a background in producing, as do I. I have to imagine is there ever a time where you say, okay, what am I producing now? What's the next video about? And how do I tell this story in a different way than either somebody else who may have a similar video, or that may almost recycle or repurpose some content?
Yeah, so I mean, it helps now that I've got a team. So I have a YouTube producer who part of her job is to generate ideas for the YouTube content that we create. I've got someone who's working on our social, so she's mostly the person who's telling us what we should be creating. She's looking at what's working, what's not, what's trending, what are like some things that we can hop onto that people are doing. So that helps. But actually, a lot of it, we've been doing so much now, and we've been in it for so long that we are actually repurposing, but also just redoing content that we did like 3 or 4 years ago, or 5 or 6 years ago. Because first of all, a lot of like information does change. So we have to update prices if there's, things shut down, things reopen, things like that. But also people just like to see fresh content, and they, one of our most popular videos was the first one that I did that told me like, oh yeah, London's the way you should go. It was just 10 things to know before you come to London. And like, even when I put it out there's a couple of things that was wrong in that video. It's not shot very well. It's very out of date now. It's basically 8 years old now, and people are still commenting on it that they've watched it. And I'm like, don't watch that. There's like, we have redone that video twice.
You're like, wait, there's better stuff now, please.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's also the pre-pandemic and post-pandemic versions of everything, I imagine, that you can do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. Like I said too, stuff shuts down all the time here. I mean, as it does in any major city. We had one shop that we loved to promote that was an alternative souvenir shop, and I still have people commenting on a video from 4 years ago where we talk about it, saying, "Oh, it looks like it shut." Like, yeah, it didn't. It didn't shut because of the pandemic, but it shut just before it. So it was actually quite lucky that they did. But and I'm like, yeah, you got to watch or buy one of our guides, because our guides are updated every year. So we delete things as they shut and update hours and things like that. So yeah, it's you're right though. Pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, that's a whole factor. Obviously with the Queen passing away, that's part of it too. Everything just changes so much here, which is fun, and it's good for keeping things fresh. But yeah, there's always something that can be recovered or talked about again in a different way.
What do you see when you're, I guess, when you're making this content? Are there reactions? Okay, well, Erin and I talked about this with a previous guest, because this is something that I would genuinely face if I didn't have like a television camera with me or something. Making the content, holding the phone up, standing, do you ever get nervous? Do you ever think, oh, these people think, oh, I'm another YouTuber out here?
Yeah. So when I have a videographer with me, I'm fine. I don't really, for the most part, I'm not that fussed. But when I have to do to camera on my phone out in public, I don't like doing that. To this day, I'm like, I find it a bit funny, which is why we do a lot of voiceovers for the short form stuff when we're out and about, because I can just film that obviously in the comfort of my home. There's no audio, like cars and buses going by to deal with. But yeah, I do sometimes. If I'm with someone, I feel much better. But if I'm on my own, which is weird because I've been doing this for so long now, and I'm hiring other people to be on camera talent. And I'm like, you have to be comfortable out and about. I'm like, I'm not, but I need you to be.
I don't need to, but that's for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, that's how I felt, because I was a producer always behind the scenes. Dan was on air for everything. So when he started forcing me to be on air, whether I liked it or not, I was always like, okay, like I need at least a warning though. Like, I need to mentally prepare for this, because
I didn't always give you the warning.
No, you didn't. It's fine. It's fine. We're still here. We still talk.
We had a lot of fun making that kind of stuff. I want to know about the people you kind of meet along the way during this whole process. I saw a video of yours. I think it was one where you were going over your weekly spend or something like that. And you said you went out and you had drinks with a couple of other YouTubers that you know in the area. How do those encounters happen? How does it happen that you meet these other big names in the YouTube game?
Are they like
So
coworkers? Is it like friendly?
Yeah.
So it can be both. It's mostly friendly, I would say, but also the way that I meet them usually is just we find each other, kind of like how anyone finds us, people like us on the internet. Their videos pop up and we start interacting. And then obviously it's usually on Instagram, I would say, because when someone with a lot of followers comments on one of your videos, it usually like prioritizes the comment. It pops up, so you don't usually miss it. It depends. It doesn't always happen, but so if that pops up, then usually like you follow each other and then you start to chat and you start to bond over the traumas of being a person on the internet and running an internet business. Which is always, it's always like, it was like, oh, that troll's on my account as well. That's funny. And then anyone who's in London, it usually ends up that we will meet, or sometimes we also meet at events, either like small ones or at bigger conferences. And it's actually quite nice. It's good because it is quite a unique job. So being able to bounce things off of each other, and the kind of strange industry that this is actually really important. And I always feel quite invigorated when I chat with my other creator friends and YouTube friends. I also get really good ideas. So a lot of times some of us will set up either masterminds, we'll do them virtually, or we just will meet for a coffee and just kind of talk about things. There's a YouTuber who does very similar to what I do. Her name's Sarah Funk, and she has I think her channel is called Sarah Funky, and she's in New York. And her husband and her were in London a couple weeks ago, and we finally met up in person, and we met for lunch. And basically the whole time we were just like comparing in New York, like what is the industry like there? Is there a lot of events? Is it blah, blah? And then we were kind of
All shop talk.
yeah, all shop talk, but it felt so good because I think that week especially I'd had a lot of frustrating interactions with various different parts of the industry, and she was like, "Oh, I deal with that too. No, we get that all the time. Like we got this email, blah blah blah." And I was like, "Okay, at least it's not just me." It makes me feel much better to hear that. So it's very helpful to make those kinds of connections.
You mentioned when you were speaking just now trolls. I have to imagine there are there are there are a lot of them. I mean, I know from personal experience there are a lot of them. And that's one of the reasons I'm not a big comment reader anymore. I just don't have the energy because I know it makes I get angry. And that's not a good place for me to be in, especially when I need to not be an angry human being. Um, uh, do you just do you read the comments?
Yeah, because we have to reply to them. Like that is part of our business. Especially on YouTube when we only do videos every other week now. So, and we do our most engaged followers and potential customers are on YouTube. So, and people do like the nice people really appreciate it when you reply, and sometimes
Mhm.
they'll be like, "Oh my God, you replied. Thank you so much." Um, but it used to be that YouTube was the worst place for comments, but TikTok is actually the worst now. Although Instagram's getting there as well too, because Reels and TikTok, the reach goes to so much farther than just people who have taken an action to follow you. So it'll show up in for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, a video. And a lot of what we do, partially because it works, but also partially because I just think tourism can get a little bit stale and cookie cutter sometimes. But a lot of what we do is I talk about things that I don't think are worth going to, or things that I think
Thank
tourists
you for
shouldn't
that.
do. I mean, it does seem like a lot of people appreciate it, but also an American woman coming in and saying her opinion about, British institutions, or, we did a video the other day, or we published it the other day, about, I said it was in my humble opinion, but I said about, should you visit or skip it? And I said, skip it for the British Museum, because I actually don't really like the British Museum that much personally. It's massive, it's crowded, the lights give me a headache. So I'm just not gonna go in there, really. And also, it's the biggest collection of stolen artifacts in the entire world.
I saw that.
Yeah, it's a fact. I'm sorry. I briefly said it, and people just went mental, especially, and it seemed like it was a lot of British people, men, who were like appalled and said, various different things. I got very angry people, saying like some really mean things and stuff like that. Most of the time I just laugh it off. But I'm not gonna lie, it is a lot to like wake up every day and just see there's 2,000 new comments on a new video or something like that. And I'm like, oh God,
That is
I know.
crazy too, because you've been there for, you said, 10 years now. So like you clearly have a valid opinion about like what's worth it and what's not. And so while I can see why people get upset, it's also like, go touch some grass. Like, why are you so concerned about what this woman thinks about one museum in the UK? Like,
yeah. Or like, go make your own content. If that's not what
yeah,
you think, you're
exactly.
entitled to that.
Yeah.
And also the people who comment, I say in a video like that, in my humble opinion, there were loads of people on the video, to be fair, who said that they didn't agree, but they said it in a respectful way. And I was like,
Yeah.
you do you. That's totally fine. It's just more of the people who were like, go back to America, you disgusting Yank, like blah, 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 stuff like that. I'm like, oh God, okay. You're a disgrace to this country.
Do you have repeat offenders that you just have to block?
Yeah, I mean, they never get to repeat. If someone's mean once,
Yeah.
I've blocked
That's it.
thousands of accounts. It's
Good
like,
for you.
Yeah,
It's the
we
best
also
feature.
it is the best, and actually even better than that is that you can block words. So unfortunately, I have had to block on both Instagram and TikTok the word American, because people, they just like, which actually I don't think is working. So I was checking comments before I got on, and a few people did comment something about, but are you American? Why are you saying you're a Londoner? But
And you're like, how did you get through the system?
yeah, exactly. TikTok, what's going on? And so I can block. There's a lot of stuff that I can block, which is actually, that's really helpful. So we don't even end up seeing any of that. But yeah, it's mental.
When you live there, when you call, one thing I noticed when I went to Europe this past fall, and then again this past spring, transportation, travel there is just so much easy. You can for $45, you can be in a different country in an hour and a half if you want. Where not necessarily the case for most of the states. You're, just crossing a state line and the experience is very similar.
But sometimes Texas does feel like a different country, but that's a conversation for another day.
That's
yes.
yeah.
Yes. There are several states that now kind of feel like different countries. Texas is just one.
No, I'm just saying. Sometimes,
in our humble opinion,
exactly.
In our humble opinion, how often? Because I have seen a couple of videos where you do get out of town. You've made content elsewhere, but how often, like on the, I guess, for vacation purposes, for holiday purposes, is that something that people actually do there? Like, oh, I'm just going to go and pop over to France for the weekend.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Especially in London. When like Londoners, as long as there's some disposable income there, people are hopping on planes there, especially the Eurostar. The Eurostar is not cheap compared to the trains in the rest of Europe. And actually in the UK, we have the most expensive trains, but it still works. But I can just hop over to Paris for 48 hours, and it's actually not, considering you're going through a tunnel for 20 minutes and you end up in a foreign country, it's really not that bad. The price, you can get pretty discounted deals if you book far in advance. And yeah, for sure. I mean, I was in Paris a couple months ago for a weekend. I flew down to Corsica, which is an island just north of Sardinia, but it's a French island. Did that for a few days. I'm potentially going to go somewhere in a couple weeks. I go down to Italy at least twice a year. It's definitely people definitely, especially my friends, at least my friends definitely take advantage. And the crazy thing too is that with the discount airlines here, like Ryanair and EasyJet, is that
Erin
actually
loves Ryanair.
Never again. I don't want to fly never again.
good. I have successfully avoided for about 6 years, so I'm trying to keep that going. Yeah.
God, the last time I was on a Ryanair flight was, I think, 2017.
And that
It's
never
terrifying.
again.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, no. I mean, but listen, it works.
Yeah. I have never, that is probably, that Ryanair flight is the most I've prayed outside of a church. Just like, please let this flight land.
You just see like the doors being held together by paper clips and yeah. But
I mean, it's a cheap flight, so I get like.
Well, and that's the whole point. That's like it just seems incredible. In the States, you don't have that real option, even with some of the real cheap airlines. Not only is the airline industry here kind of in chaos because they're so short-staffed in every position that they have, you're still paying $150, I would say, minimum for a ticket.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I think just the distances as well. I can get down to Italy in just over 2 hours, and that is a southern part of the continent versus my timings on flights from New York are that are not intercontinental. But Florida is what, like 2.5, 3 hours to get down to Florida? More?
Yeah, I think it depends on where, but yeah, about that.
Yeah. So you're in Florida, which, take it or leave it. That's fine. But I would rather go for pasta. And and the thing too, what's interesting about here in the UK, like I said before, the trains are relatively more expensive here than they are in the rest of Europe. So that's why it's so popular for Brits to go, and like anyone who lives in London to go fly other places, because I mean, I have a friend who's from Italy, and he can hop on a Ryanair flight and be back in Italy for significantly less than if he was to take a train up to Manchester. So it's like, as long as you time it right, and he flies Ryanair, he takes the bus to Stansted Airport. So that costs him, actually, I think he takes the Stansted Express, which he says often costs him more than the flight was.
Wow.
Which I think that's exactly what the transport is like here. But so yeah. And then, if you're 18 and you want to get away with your friends, you can fly down to Spain to one of the party spots there for nothing. And it is definitely, I mean, I'm not really doing the budget stuff anymore. I try to stick with BA as much as I can, love them or hate them. But, even still, it's not, it's not too bad.
I have to imagine along that path, you get to meet some really, I mean, not only are you experiencing such amazing and historic culture, but you're meeting some incredible people. And that kind of brings me to, all right, 10 years ago, you moved, again, 3,500 miles away from home. How the hell do you meet people? And how do you make friends?
Dan wants me to make more friends.
I'm looking for advice.
This is all a ruse. He just wants more friends.
Yes, will you be my friend?
I have to go. I'll talk to you. Someone's at the door. Right. Okay. So do you mean in London or in general?
Well, both in London, and then any other place that you visit, because you're meeting.
I was gonna say, how is it like to put down roots? Because like you're obviously building a new life. So how was that starting out?
Yeah. Okay. So I think my experience, obviously, when I moved here for love, I had kind of like a set group of friends, almost like a built-in group of friends that I had when I first came here, which was really lovely. But actually, like, long story short, as often happens in breakups and divorces, you lose a chunk of those people. So I kind of like, I had another set of friends that was really close with, and I'm still friends with, that were separate from my ex. So I had them. I also had this opportunity to build up a new friendship group. So it's kind of like almost starting fresh in some respect. And I used to think that London is hard to make friends in, but the last year or so, I'm not sure that I would agree with that. I think the main thing is you have to put yourself out there so much. You have to basically accept any invitation that anyone gives you, to any coffee, to any dinner, to any house party, to any painting and prosecco class, anything that pops up. And as long as you have a positive, fun attitude and you're inquisitive and you want to get to know people, I think that it's doable to start making friends. I think also the other main thing that's really important is to do that in the area that you live in, because London is so spread out that if you go somewhere and you make a friend, and I live in East London and this friend lives all the way in Notting Hill, it's going to take me like an hour to get over to Notting Hill some days, or then we have to meet in Central, and then all we can do if we meet in Central is go for dinner and then maybe some drinks, but we don't like go to each other's places. It's hard to make friends that are in the other parts of the city, but when I kind of focused more on the area that I live in, that helped to strengthen my friendships much faster, because then I could text one of my friends nearby and say, want to go for a coffee? Are you free for a coffee? Or I've got a free evening. Do you want to go have a quick drink down at the pub? And that seemed to like really help. And now a huge proportion of my friend group are within like a 15-minute walking distance. And I think that's really the key, is trying to like do local stuff as much as possible and like really build off of that network.
And it sounds
I
like you're
think,
super involved in your community too, just from like popping around to all the different spots.
yeah.
Yeah. Like I'll go co-work. I mean, I've got a co-working space near where I live, so I've made friends there. But that was really important. I wanted to be at one that was by where I live, because it's a lot of people that also live in the same area. So we can actually go for drinks after, because people don't have to like get to the other side of the city to get home and, do whatever.
Mhm.
And just like going to the pub, and I meet one friend here, then we are at having a coffee and they see their other friend, and then we meet, and then or we talk to somebody at the pub, and then exchange numbers and go from there. So yeah.
I like to I like to travel, which I discovered solo. Listen, I thoroughly enjoy it. There's no schedule, there's no regimen. I do what I want when I want, and I don't have to ask anybody's permission. Um, However, so when I went to London this past fall, I thought to myself, okay, like I need to actually live. I'm here. We need to experience this place now. So I went to Soho, and I must have walked around like 4 city blocks probably 4 times until I could build up the courage. And I was like, okay, you have to enter one of these pubs at some point. You have to go in and you have to speak to people. Otherwise, what the hell are you doing here? And I got to tell you, I did it. And it was it was the highlight of visiting that city, the people that I got to meet there.
Oh
Just
yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because Londoners, and obviously, so Soho is kind of a mix of Londoners and then people from out of town who are in for work, or and tourists, obviously. So you can meet all different types of people there. But Londoners, it's compared to Americans, especially compared to New Yorkers. And I have to say, when I go back to New York, I do love that because solo travel, I'll stay in Manhattan for a few days and I'll see friends that I know, but also will go to do things on my own as well. And it's so easy. Like I always meet somebody. I'll sit at a bar. I start chatting with someone. We exchange numbers or Instagram. I go sit over, go for a walk. I sit like on the High Line, start chatting to somebody. It's not quite as much like that here, which that's where I think people find it challenging to make friends. The upside of being American, though, is that people quite actually like Americans. And so they're used to Americans being friendly. So usually, if you can make the first move, it sounds like dating, but if you make the first move, sometimes people are like, oh, I'm in my friend group. I'm not really that fussed to like make friends tonight. But if everyone's been drinking, usually if you make the first move, then people will start chatting at least for like a little bit. So, yeah, it's quite interesting. It's fun. I think also, Soho is that's not kind of that is an intimidating place to do that for sure. So I would say other places that are better to do that would be a little bit more outside of the center. So I think the pubs in Notting Hill are really good for that. And then also the pubs around Broadway Market, which is kind of near where I live. It's a little bit more relaxed and chill, and there's less tourists and a lot more Londoners. So if next time you come back, if you want to try those areas too, but you dove in head first.
Are you writing this down, Dan, for when you need to make friends?
Thank God we're recording. Notting Hill is actually where I stayed. And I mentioned that I do like your do this, don't do that tourism videos, because anytime I go somewhere, I discovered that I don't want to do the touristy things. I don't listen. I can look at pictures of it. Yes, I can look at pictures of it online, but the most touristy thing I did was stay in Notting Hill. So that I could see the market on Portobello Road because of the Julia Roberts movie, Notting Hill.
I was waiting for this. I was waiting for you to finally admit it.
Because she has my heart forever and for always. She knows it. But so staying in Notting Hill was the most touristy thing that I did, which actually brings up another question that I want to talk to you about, because I did something that you say not to do, or you don't recommend doing.
Okay.
And I want you to discuss it. I stayed at an Airbnb before the housing crisis was really making headlines. Wonderful host, could not have been a sweeter young woman. It was her 30th birthday. She was going away for that weekend, and it just so happened that she was putting her place on Airbnb. And then this American nerd from, Rochester, New York comes in. But give us your take. What are your suggestions? You recommend hotels. Talk to us about the housing crisis there.
Yeah, so we've had a housing crisis here for a long time. It's not dissimilar to like New York, honestly, most major cities these days. And basically, there are statistics that show that areas that do have more Airbnbs, that it does negatively affect the housing market there, and that increases pricing for locals, which makes sense because obviously demand goes down. So that's the main reason that I prefer to tell people to avoid Airbnb. It also is not really that much of a deal anymore. It kind of depends on your situation and what you're looking for and what kind of standard you're happy with. And we've had loads of followers that have said they have had terrible experiences with Airbnb here in London, and other cities. So yeah, I think for me, we have a philosophy for Love in London, largely led by me, that if you're traveling somewhere, you want to do everything that you can to make sure that you're not negatively impacting the people that you're surrounded by and who actually call that place home. There's a lot of ways that you will do that. So, for example, obviously, you don't want to ever leave like your trash anywhere. You don't want to do this, do that. And unfortunately, Airbnb, it does have a negative impact on people like me, and especially right now. And we're having also, on top of a housing crisis, a really severe cost of living crisis. There's a lot of people using food banks right now, tons of people who are getting kicked out of their flats because the supply of housing is so low that their landlords, when it comes to renewal time, will tell them that they're going to increase their rent by 40%. And if you don't take it, I'll get someone else who will. So, just ethically for us, it's I don't think, and I personally, when I'm traveling in any city, that does have a housing crisis, which again is most of them. I also do not use Airbnb. So yeah, so we do have alternatives. That's the thing. So obviously, when I traveled when I was younger, there was no Airbnb. So I used to book a bed in a hostel, and there's still loads of tons of great hostels here. If you've got a group of 4 of you anyway that you were going to book the Airbnb with, then you can book a room that's 4 beds and your own ensuite bathroom, and you're sorted, and it's going to be cheaper than the Airbnb anyway. So that's an option. We have fantastic apart hotels here in different price ranges. So it just depends on how central you want to be, how nice you want it to be, what kind of views you want. And they also have the added bonus of that you actually have staff there to help you if anything goes wrong. There's other rooms. So if, a pipe bursts in your room, they'll move you to another one, which Airbnb, when that happens, obviously it's, if they do actually help you, is a whole thing that has to, they got to move you maybe across the city. So, and yeah, obviously we've got hotels too. And, those are the main, options I would say for, avoiding Airbnb.
Fair enough. Listen, I appreciate the when you go support the fact that you're a tourist, support the tourism industry, support that community. I do like that. I like that theory. I like that motto. I think that is a sustainable way to go and experience different places,
Yeah, I think travel is such a privilege. So even if you're traveling on a budget, you are still significantly more privileged than the majority of the world. If you can get on a plane or you can get on a train and you can afford to, especially if you can afford to come to London, even on a budget, I do think that we do have a responsibility to make sure that we are spending that money responsibly and it's going into the right pockets. And, also part of the reason that staying in a hotel or a hostel or an apart hotel is that your money gets distributed to a bunch of different employees. That company is hiring many, many Londoners to work there, to clean, to, work at reception, versus Airbnb. It's basically only just going to the landlord who, we have landlords can, everyone has different opinions. It depends on the person, obviously. But so yeah, again, like I think anytime that you can use your money to the best, where it's gonna, be best used, is always an added bonus. And also I do actually think we have a bit of a responsibility to do that. Because travel is, like I said, a privilege. It's not like a right. Housing is a right. Travel is a privilege.
I want to talk for a second, if you would, about city living versus countryside, because I believe during for a period of time during the thick of the pandemic, you left, central London, right?
Yeah, I left London totally. Yeah, I did.
What was that like? It sounds like you weren't a big countryside fan.
No, I mean, so I moved out. I was living in a house share in London, and I could tell that there was another wave of lockdowns that were coming, and I wasn't particularly happy in the house that I was in. And the guy that I was dating at the time was on furlough, and he was living in West Sussex, in like this like village in West Sussex. And so I just said, you know what? We're going to be in lockdown anyway. Why don't I move out of the house share? Because I don't want to be there anyway. I'll come live with you. We'll split the rent. It'll be super cheap for us. And then we'll kind of just like wait it out until they lift the lockdowns again. And then the idea was I was going to come back to London. But yeah, it was quiet there.
Little
Really
too quiet for your liking.
Yeah, even for a lockdown. Because the thing about, my friend, yeah, it's just really too quiet for my liking. But, the thing about when my friends were in London for lockdown, you at least could go for a walk in the park. You could like sit far away from each other. You could walk, I don't live far from the canal. You could go onto the canal, walk along and like see all the houseboats and stuff. And I actually couldn't really walk that far because it was just the position of the place I was staying in when I was in the countryside. So I also couldn't go to like a coffee shop on my own. The guy I was dating had to drive us, and not that there was coffee shops open, but to get takeaway stuff. Whereas here people could still go, could still do stuff. It was still kind of buzzy. So yeah, I'm such a city person though. It's like to my detriment because I'm paying exorbitant, like in crazy amounts in rent, and the price of a pint these days is just insane. But it's just
don't
where
even
I
get
need
me
to be.
started. But no, I totally relate too. I love being in a city. Like I love that there's just like always people around and that there's always something going on. So every now and then I do love escaping to like the Adirondacks in upstate New York. But that's usually just to like reset. And then after like a certain number of days, I'm like, okay, I need to get back to society. Like I need to be around people again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that I do the same thing. That's exactly it. And then like 3 days done.
That's exactly it too. 3 days is like the I don't want to turn into a crazy killer, in a movie because I'm, solitude. No,
Then
all work.
I don't want to be in the woods when you do turn into the crazy killer. So
same. That doesn't sound great.
Fair. That's fair. No,
they're out of the woods.
Yes. I just have a couple more questions, then I will let you go. I don't want to keep you too long. What is your favorite? I keep on looking over here as if there's something written down there. There's nothing written down there. I do. I've got my iPad and a phone.
Is just.
I wouldn't have known.
We're prepared. We're prepared people. You can't let her know that when we're not.
Well, I did prepare. I watch a lot of her videos, so I feel like I have a general grasp. And Erin, don't forget, I do it for a living. Thank you very much. What is your favorite part of London and the UK?
Okay, so London, my favorite part is the diversity of everything. So the diversity of the people that live here. I mean, I've met people from all over the world who come from all different walks of life and also have then picked up their lives and moved here, which is no easy feat, obviously, but is especially no easy feat for people coming from countries where it's a lot harder to do that than it was for me. So I really like that. But that diversity also, it bleeds into the food here and into the architecture and so many different parts of the things that we encounter here each day. So that for me, that's part of when I go back to Long Island, not to slate Long Island, but it just feels a bit like I lose that. And I always feel like, oh, I can't wait to get back to London because there's this like Turkish restaurant I still want to try. And, it's not as like, there's just more things going on and more diverse offerings in many senses of the case. For the UK, so the rest of the UK is very different from London. And if you go into the comments of a lot of my videos, you'll have lots of British people pointing that out in various different ways. London is definitely, for sure, I couldn't see myself anywhere else besides London in the UK. I mean, it's quite interesting. For me, what I find really crazy is, and this stands out still 10 years later, England is such a small country, but the amount of dialects and accents that are here, considering that you could go 20 miles east and the accent would be very different and very heavy. And then if you go, an hour north, that's also a very, very different accent. And then even the ways that the names they say and the things they call certain things are very different to down here in the South or even just different cities. It's so crazy. To me, that is like still so fascinating. And I don't think I'll ever really get over that. It's also very interesting to see how that plays into the class divide here. which, you know, I'm an outsider for this, I would say, looking in, but seeing how those dynamics are, it's very, very clear. And the accents really come into that, which is very interesting.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Really, really interesting to observe it. You see it in the news, you see it. Northerners, when they come down to London to work, it's when they're doing interviews, they can always feel I've spoken to people who are from the North, and they feel this kind of shift, I guess, when they're being interviewed and people hear the accents. And it's to the point where a lot of people will change their accents when they're doing interviews to try to combat that. Yeah. Which is crazy. And I'm sure we have some kind of equivalent to that in the US, but obviously the US is significantly bigger. So it's different. But yeah, I just find that so fascinating.
Fascinating, but also at the same time kind of unfortunate.
Yeah.
You know? But, lastly for you, where do you see Love and London 5 years from now? What is your hope for the company? What is your dream expansion project, world takeover look like?
Right. So I'm hoping the plan is by next year that we have Love in Paris. So by the end of 2024, I don't think we've got the Olympics there next year. I don't think we'll have it in time for that, but we're going to start doing stuff with that probably early next year. To get the ball rolling. And then 5 years, I want to be in other cities around Europe. I would really like to be almost like the new, fresh version of Rick Steves for our generation. But I won't be the face of all these cities. So we'll hire other people, people who actually live in Paris, people who actually live in Rome, people who live in Amsterdam, and they will be doing
international correspondence.
Exactly. Ooh. Yeah.
Dan is filling out an application as we speak.
As we speak.
Great. Love to hear it. So I think I don't know if we'll expand beyond Europe. I think because our main market is Americans, and I think the reason that we do so well is that obviously Americans do a lot more research when people come over here. It's a much bigger trip versus if someone's flying from Italy, they might not want to invest in like one of our itineraries or something because it's just a shorter trip. They're just going to wing it versus a family of 4 who's coming for a week in London is a huge trip, huge expense. They would rather invest in a 6-day itinerary so they know it's going to work well versus just trying to wing it because that's kind of crazy. So I don't know if we'll go beyond Europe, but who knows? We'll see. But yeah, I definitely want to conquer a lot of all the major cities and Italy as a whole.
Well, I think you'll be very successful. I mean, you're fantastic so far at turning out the content, getting the clicks. Congratulations. It's well over 100,000 subscribers at this point. What's the number?
So on YouTube, 245,000, I think we have now.
Okay.
Yeah. And Instagram, we're there too. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I mean, that's great success. And Jess, thank you so much for your time. Wish you nothing but the best. Really appreciate you speaking with us today.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. I'm glad you reached out, and thanks for taking the time as well.
That was good.
Yeah,
I enjoyed that.
Yeah, but I hate doing, well, I shouldn't say hate. That's the wrong word to use. But it's like when we have these interviews, I'm like, I should book a flight. Like, I'm just like, I'm like, I have PTO. I could use it. I could go tomorrow.
Listen, I'm at dinner on Friday talking to someone who lives in Barcelona. And I'm thinking Friday night, I get home falling asleep in bed on the laptop looking at flights to Barcelona. When can I go? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But I think that's also kind of the beauty of this is to, I don't know, took me 37 years, Lanahan, to actually do it, to make the leap and go somewhere. And now I don't want to stop. I know,
never too late.
But I think that's the beauty of this is that we can hopefully inspire other people to take that leap who would say,
Dan Schrack, the travel inspiration of 2023, possibly 2024.
possibly 2024. Here's
rolled
hope
out.
if we get enough
rolled out.
subscribers.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. I'll let you go back to work.
Yeah, I kind of have to pay the bills somehow, so.
All right, I gotta go eat dinner. Bye.